Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you. My name is Tim Harris. It's 10 o'clock. Means it's time for 10 with Tim. We are going verse by verse through right now the book of Ecclesiastes, and we are finishing the book of Ecclesiastes today. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 is where we are. Before we go there, I think Augustus and Robin, two of you had asked me about back in chapter 10, verse 11, just one of those weird verses I didn't really talk about. If a snake bites you before you charm it, what's the use of being a snake charmer? That's how the New Living Translation reads it. It's a little bit hard to translate, but that's the basic idea. You got a snake charmer that gets bit by the snake before he could charm it. And so what's the point there? It's one of those verses, remember that we were talking about foolishness versus wisdom. And my opinion here, you let me know what you think, Augustus, Robin, if it sounds right to you. But I think the point there is about foolish delay. You know what I mean? Like here's a guy who knows what to do. He's a snake charmer. Here's a snake, but the dummy sits there and doesn't do what he knows to do, and therefore he gets bit. You know, I think the idea is there that foolish delay will come back to bite you. You know what I mean? Foolish delay, like don't just sit there when you know what you're supposed to do. Do it. You know, I think that is right there in the vein of what Kohelet says to do over and over and over. You know, act now, do it now. You know. On to chapter 12. Isn't chapter 12 fun? Depending on the translation you're using here, in this particular chapter, the final chapter, there's this section here that depicts growing old as like this old house that is slowly, dilapidating and turning into rubble. And we're talking about your body, and that's the point there. This is actually like a head-to-toe assessment coming straight from your future, doctor's chart. You know what I mean? Like, this is everybody. This is what's going to happen. New Living Translation kind of drives me nuts here, and I know I use it, and I typically like it. I think it's a pretty good translation, but New Living goes too far to try to pin down this poetic language. And I kind of like letting it be a little more open. New Living, like for example, says, before your legs, the guards of the house, give out. Well, the Hebrew there just simply leaves it sort of open. It talks about the housekeeper shall tremble and the strong men are bowed. The grinders cease because they are few. And it's kind of mysterious and poetic and weird. And I like that because I think some of these are left a little more open to interpretation, and once you begin to really pin those down, you lose that sense of, what's that talking about, Now, some of them I think are pretty obvious, or at least I think you get the gist of it. For example, there where it says, the keepers of the house shall tremble. I think that's probably related to the hands. The strong men are bowed. In the Living Translation says that's the shoulders, but I think that's probably legs there. The grinders cease because they are few. That's got to be teeth. I would think that's teeth. Teeth are like the only thing that fall out as you go. Those looking at the windows are darkened. I think we're talking about how you can't see out your eyes anymore. You just can't see anymore. The doors shall be shut in the streets. New Living Translation says that's, like your ears can't hear anymore. But I think that's the next one. When it says the doors will be shut, I really think I think that's a reference to bowels. You know what I mean? I think that's just a reference to how, things get shut up and, nothing goes out anymore, and that is a part of old age, I won't name any names, but I used to visit a lady. I loved her. I visited her regularly, but she got into this point of her life where I would say, how you doing today? And she would say, oh, I'm doing fine today. This morning I had the most satisfying bowel movement. And I'm just like, I didn't want to know. I just want to go, hey, lady, when somebody asks you how you're doing, just say fine, But she just reached that point in her life where that was just the most satisfying thing because it didn't happen every day anymore, And like, don't laugh at her. This is going to happen to you. And I think that's the point here. You rise up at the voice of the birds, you just wake up early. When I was a teenager, I could sleep till 11 o'clock. Y'all remember in the summer when you didn't have anything to do and you could just sleep till 11? You could stay up and then sleep till 11 or noon. Man, I now am one of those old people that wake up at like 5:15. I have sometimes, woke up before 5 o'clock. What is wrong with me? But I just wake up, they become afraid of the high place. In other words, you're always going to fall. You don't want to be, you don't want to be the lady in the floor, falling and can't get up, so you're always afraid of falling. Almond trees shall blossom. Almond blossoms are white. It's white hair. The locust makes himself a burden. Yeah, that one's hard to explain there. I think there at the end here's a reference to the loss of sexual desire. You just reach that age where you have lost that love and feeling, and this is this long poetic description of, like I say, your future, medical assessment, man. All these things are going to happen. You're going to be blind, deaf, constipated. So what's the point? The point is how this chapter begins. Remember now your Creator. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth before all this. Remember your Creator while you're young, while you still got life ahead of you. In my mother's and my father's photo album from when I was very young, we have a photo of my granddaddy Law in his coffin in his house. My granddaddy Law is, I don't know, one of the only people I remember, and probably one of the last of my family who number one, when he died, he was left at home. Like they had the casket out in the parlor of his house. That used to be very common before funeral homes took over the business. People used to be laid out in the parlor at home, in your casket at home. And then on top of that, we took pictures of him in his casket, which again seems really strange to us now, but in the old days that was common. I remember when people would take pictures at the funeral home. You would take pictures of the deceased. You would gather the family in front of the tombstone and everybody take pictures. Nobody would pull out their phone at a funeral now. I think that's an interesting shift in our culture. I think it sort of demonstrates in some ways exactly what Ecclesiastes is warning against. You don't want to be in a situation where you forget that youth turns into old age and living turns into dying. We're all headed to the same place, and that's important to know, because you need to know that you don't have all the time in this world. So in a sense, Ecclesiastes, this chapter here, these first 7 verses or so, are an old man trying to tell a young person what they desperately need to know but are very unlikely to hear. It is hard when you're young ever to read this and think, man, you can't even imagine, wanting a bowel movement that bad when you're young. And this is the point. I can remember when our son was small, we'd be pushing the stroller through the zoo, and an old person would come up and just say to us, enjoy these days while your son is young. Enjoy these days. And I think, what is her problem? You know what I mean? And now I'm a guy that I want to go up to every young parent and go, oh, enjoy these days. You can't make young people understand how they need to just enjoy these days. But this is like the last part of Ecclesiastes, man. Life goes by so fast. It's like a vapor. It disappears into nothingness. So remember your Creator, while you're young, while you still have life ahead of you. In other words, make God everything in your life while you still have life to live. I just think that's so very important. Remember Him now, because you don't want to miss a thing of what He's intended for you in this life. Life is meaningless, of course, in many, many ways under the sun, and life is very short, but there are just so many good things, tucked in here like Easter eggs, and you could miss them. If you're distracted or if you're foolish, you can miss these things. And I think part of what chapter 12 helps us understand is a lot of the best things in life are just the everyday things that you don't even think about at the time, like what it is to wake up in the morning and hear the birds, or to enjoy a good meal, or to enjoy, sexual intimacy. That's here too, right? It's one of God's good gifts. And you only have so many nights in your life, to share the bed, with the spouse, the love of your life. Enjoy these things and remember God and know that these good things come from Him. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to miss a thing. You don't want to miss any of these things because it just goes by so fast. I think the point here is that you will never really know the sweetness of life until you acknowledge its shortness. That makes sense? Did I say that right? You'll never really know the sweetness of life until you can acknowledge its shortness. And so Ecclesiastes ends where it begins. It goes back to everything is meaningless, vanity of vanities. The preacher just finishes the same way he started, but we're not exactly where we started. I think Ecclesiastes itself takes us on quite a journey. And while he's trying to say it's all meaningless, by the end of it, what I'm left with is this incredible realization of how beautiful it is. Yes, there's a burden to life, but there is a beauty to it, and you need to keep your eyes open for that. Anyway, that's the book of Ecclesiastes. I love it so much. Now, Monday, 10 o'clock, y'all read ahead and be ready to go through the Song of Solomon with me. We're just going to spend 1 week because it's not a long book, and because in some ways I'm gonna let us move pretty quickly through it. But it's good. It's good. It's in God's Word for a reason, and we're going to read it together. It's going to be good. So for Monday morning, the Song of Songs, chapter 1, chapter 1 to 17 verses, chapter 1 of Song of Songs, and we'll start that on Monday morning. I love you guys. Listen, this coming Sunday, I'm doing a standalone sermon on worry. So if that is your tendency, again, coming out of the last few years, man, so many of us are so tied up in knots over anxiety and fear and worry. So I'm going to preach on worry on Sunday, 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11 here at Woodburn Baptist Church. Listen, if you don't have a church home, don't stay home. Come to Woodburn and let's be in the Word of God together. In person, we'll worship the Lord together. I love you so much. I've got a wedding after this. I've had a week of funerals, and this weekend I have a wedding. So I'm going to celebrate with Austin and Lauren, and God bless them. I pray that God gives them all the happiness in the world, and that they will realize how sweet life is while they still have life to live. Yeah, God bless you guys. I love you.